Welcome my friends, welcome on Travis Scott channel. In this video I will show you how to create Internationalization site and it's the second version, the complete guide. In the previous video I already showed how to do it, but in this one there are a lot of improvements, especially for forms and work with backend. So let's do it step by step. First of all, we will use create React application to create an app. The next one, we will create this application for 3 different languages, English, German and French. We will use React-Intl module to do it. And very important, in this version, we will create architecture to do scalable application with all providers we need. Also, as in the previous one, we will create formatted message wrapper to do our life more simple. The next one is translation fields with parameters and HTML markup, where we can pass different HTML and other components into our translation files. The next one, super important, is React forms. For example, we had previously problems with select and input placeholders where there was object translation instead of text we need. The next one, it's nested objects with translation. For example, we have object name, inside we have form, inside we have field name, which is an object, and in the object we have placeholder field. This will do our code a bit more cleaner and it will be easy to read. The next one is getting data from backend, data for a specific language, because on the site we have only a small part of the text hard-coded. All other text is getted from the backend. So we need to clarify what language we need to get. The next one, I will show you how to save the language, and when user refresh the page, we will have the same language, not the initial one. And in the end, very important part is pros and cons of this approach, and do we have a better solution? Because there are a few alternatives for internationalization. Let's start from the beginning. We have empty React, create React app, and first of all, let's clean up it a bit. So I'm using Visual Studio Code. It's free, and let's start. First of all, we need to remove report web vitals. We don't need anymore. Also, let's delete. Also, we don't need tests. We can delete all tests. Then we don't need this logo. And inside app.js, we can delete everything from header and logo. Also, as you see, we don't import React, so it's because we are using React 17, the latest one. What's the difference and what is in this version you can find in other video, and you can find it on my channel. Also, all source codes you can find on my channel as well. Let's do some structure. First of all, we need to create new folder its components. Inside we will have app, and one more, we need i18n with all translations. So let's move up to this one. So we don't need this anymore. Let's leave only for header. In height, let's do in pixels, and in index.js. Okay, the next one, in components.js we will use index.js. And from this one, import Also, let's rename index.js and style CSS. Inside index.js, we will rename CSS file. Now let's take a look what we have. And everything works great. Inside up, we can leave some text. Okay, first of all, let's start from internationalization. We need 3 different languages and we need the Intl provider. So we have 3 locals, it's English, German and French. We saved in constants. And now we need the create provider to wrap our application into React-Intl. First of all, let's install React-Intl. And the next one, we will create provider.js. So in our provider we will have children and props local. By default, let's use English. And what we need? Intl provider. Text component wrapper will be React fragment. It's a wrapper for translations. So let's import fragment. The next one, we need local. It's props what we passed. And the next one, very important, it's a list of messages. And now we need to create these messages. But first of all, let's finish this part and we will wrap children. The next one, let's export this provider. So we need to create messages. Let's create new folder messages. And based on the language code, we will create file. So for each language we will use, we need to create specific file with all translations. It will be English field and the object, for example, and we need to do the same for all other languages with specific translation. So let's create and copy this one and paste it here. Just change for German. Let's translate this message. And the same for French. Okay, the next one, let's create index file where we will export all these files. Index.js. We need to import all files. So in case you need to add any language, you create a new specific file and extract these fields into this one object with a key of a language. Now when we have these messages, let's go to provider and import messages. So now we have these messages. Okay, we can test our application inside index.js in components. We have op. Okay, and in i18n we need to create a new file index and export everything what we have. Okay, and create our architecture a bit more flexible. Let's create a new component to the provider. In this folder, we will wrap all our application into different providers. The first one will be Internationalization. So we have children and let's specify local. Let's do it, for example, hard-coded and US. And we need export default this component. Now when we have it, let's go to index and import this provider. Okay, and let's create some translation. Let's go to our application, and inside this application we need output translated hello message. To do it, we need import specific component formatted message from React-Intl, and inside let's put format message ID. It will be what we have in messages. For example, we want to show hello. Okay, let's take a look what we have. We can start our application. And we have hello message. Let's try to change it, for example, for another local. And it's translated. Now we can create a simple sample. Let's create a menu in the header and translate all items. So in our application, let's create components and the header. Index.js inside. So we need menu. Let's create the items, for example. Home, it will be translation key, and there will be a link. Some specific hard-coded links, it doesn't matter. And inside return we need now and for example we need to go one by one in all elements in menu and output it. Here and inside we will have grab. And we need put translation of menu item. To do it, let's import formatted message. And ID will be key. Okay, now we need to put all these items into a translation file. Okay, let's go to English and for example we want menu, Okay, and we want key, it will be menu key. It's a calculated string, so we have nested object menu.key. Okay, let's take a look what we have. We need the import. Let's go to index.js and let's import header. So we have links, but we do not have translated files, items. Let's translate it by, first of all, as you see, we have nested. In case we will remove it from here and put it directly. Let's check. And remove menu. Now it works. Oh. It doesn't work because of we have French by default. Okay, let's remove it and leave by default English one. So as you see, it's translated. Let's add some styles and fix issue with the nested object. First of all, let's import Let's remove these header styles from components to header component and let's specify for who it will be. And for hover, we want to change color of our links. A bit opacity, and what we have menu items. Also for it's text decoration none. And now let's fix issue with menu items. So we want menu. To fix it, we need do a flat items in the key of the key. Let's go to i18n and inside provider where we are passing messages, we need flat these messages. To do it, let's go to terminal in second top and install specific library. It's library flat. Now add flat. Now we will import flatten function, and for messages let's wrap it into the flatten. And now all items in the menu in the messages will be with one nested down. Okay, let's check. And now as you see, everything works great. In our translation messages for English we have nested object, but on the side it works great. The next one, let's add buttons to switch language. Okay, to do it, in our app let's add footer. So we will have footer, and inside let's have some div. Footer and what do we need? We need 3 buttons. Let's put these buttons into the list. For English, French and German. Let's add some styles. And we need to add these styles. Okay, let's delete this file. And in footer, so now it's better. Now we have in footer index file. Don't forget export it. For footer and for up footer what we need. Place the direction row as well, one row. Okay, and let's add our footer into our app component. And we put footer. Okay, we will fix resolving the path. Now we have 3 buttons, but we need to change language. To save specific language, we need to use some global storage, and for our case, we will use context API. So let's save language to the context, and when we click a button, we will change context from in context API. We will change language in context API. So to do it, let's go to our components and we will add the context. Index.js and so how to use context.js you can find in a separate video on my YouTube channel as well. Export default. We need the objects of local and US, for example, is a current language. Or we can export already saved constant, for example, okay, and in context, let's create a new application context. We need to import create context from Redux, from React, and const app context, create context. It's a new one, and we need the provider. All children will wrap with this context, and we will have data access to the data. Right now we will put empty data, but then we will qualify what we need to put here. And we will wrap children. The next one, we need the data. And we need function to change this data. To implement this functionality, we will use reducer. So let's import use reducer. And we will create new reducer. So we need use reducer, we need to put function reducer, we will create it right now. And the default value, it will be our default context. We have it. So we need function reducer, let's create it. It accepts current state and action. So we have it, and to provide it, we need pass object. So let's create const value, state, and dispatch. And we will pass value. So in reducer function, we need to implement regular reducer with for different actions. In our case, we will have switch action type, it's a required field. So case, let's put reset, for example. We will return default context, and for example, when we have case set, when we will have case set local, we need to return a new object state, and local we will have from action. It's pretty easy reducer. So we have this app context provider, and we need to wrap the whole application into this provider. To do it, let's go to our index, and first of all we need to export this provider, and we need to export context. App context and app context provider. Now let's use this provider. Import from context, and we will grab the whole application into this provider. So now when we have provider, we can go to our component provider, and we can use context. So to use context, let's import hook use context, from React, and we will import our context we already created. Inside we need using use context, we will have state, and it will be access to our state. And let's pass local. We have it will be state local. So now we pass to our Intl provider. We are passing localization. We are saving into the context. And now when we will click a button, we can change this localization. Okay, let's go back to our application footer, and in this footer we need to use import app context, and import hook use context. So let's get So what do we need? We need when we click button, we need dispatch event to change localization. We will call function set language with a specific language. Let's create this function. So what we need to do inside? We need only dispatch object type will be set local, what we described in reducer function, and local what we have, what we passed. Now let's copy this for French and German, only change key. Let's try what we have. So now when we switch language, we see that language is changed. To see the result, let's only add translations to our messages. So it's for French and for German. And everything works great. One more in footer. For example, we can disable this button if this language already is selected. So let's use disabled. In case state local, it's locals, for English is English. And one more improvement for on click, let's use callback. It's from best practices in React. So when we use click, we don't have any dependency except dispatch, but dispatch isn't changed very often. Okay. So, and let's switch. As you see, selected language is disabled button. Button is disabled. Okay, the next one, let's add the form with, let's add the simple wrapper for internationalization. We have messages and we are using formatted message wrapper component. Let's create a wrapper and we will call it translate. We need to import formatted message and So now in our application we can use function translate instead of this object. We will pass ID, a key of translation, and value. It's additional object with fields for calculated translation fields. I will show how it works. Okay, let's create some new component. It will be form. Because of using forms, it's pretty challenging in translations. With translations, index, yes. And we will use it in our application. Okay, what do we need? Let's create, for example, type text, name, and we want to put name with some placeholder. We can try to use formatted message, or so as you see, placeholder is a property of input tag, so we can't use formatted message directly. We can try to use translate function we declared. Okay, let's add such key. Okay, so as you see, we have comma. As you see, we have a problem with object because of we're putting component into the placeholder. It doesn't work. To fix this issue with forms, we can do a bit another approach. Let's import formatted message component, and inside we need a wrapper. Inside we will have its rendering props component in React. We will have property placeholder inside the function. It's the parameter of function, and now we can return this input. So it's a function with the parameter placeholder, and now we can use only this one. Based on ID, it will build translation, and this translation will be put to the variable placeholder. Now let's try. And as you see, put your name. Everything works great. The next one possible issue, let's add select component with, for example, choosing a country. So in case you will use formatted message with the previous approach, it will be the same issue. To fix it, we need to use the same wrapper. So we have select, and inside we will have option. Form. For example, for US, we will have one country US, second one and one more, it's other. And select. Okay, let's add these countries. Okay, and as you see, it works great as well. You can choose any country you need. So with the forms, it works great. One more, what we can add, it's putting dynamic fields. For example, we have translation team. So we want to put hi, and then we want to put name. And some message. For example, subscribe YouTube channel. How we can put a name? It's calculated field and we don't have it. So we can use a specific syntax with curly brackets and put name. And now when we will use salute, for example, so now we need to put some name. For example, name Maxim. And now as you see, field was translated. Now we can check translate it into the French and German. And you see it's translated. For form we don't have fields. Okay, now we can put some dynamic data from this input. To do it, it's a bit work from forms with React. So let's use state from React and by default we will have empty name. So for placeholder let's use value name and on change event we need event, target and value from this target. So now when we will type, we will save event, we will save name value to this variable, and we can pass name as a property. Let's check. So we don't have, when we put, as you see, we have this value. And one more, for example, if we have name, we can put translation. If we don't have any name, let's leave it empty. Okay, this works great. One more feature I want to show you here with translation fields, it's calculated or rich text fields with the possibility to pass some markup or other components to this translation. For example, let's add a new field. So each we will call it rich text I have. Then we will pass bold HTML tag, and inside we have some very interesting calculation. We are passing number. It will be plural one if it's number 1. We show text dog. Otherwise, we show text dogs in case we have a lot of dogs. How it works? Let's go to form and we will create a new one. This field is, for example, dogs. Type will be number, value dogs, the same set dogs function, we will create it, and we have placeholder. Okay, let's create this dog set dogs with state 0. And now we need to add this placeholder dogs placeholder. And in this form, let's put new field. It's format message as well. ID is rich text, and for example, we are putting for field num that we had in translation, we'll put dogs, and we can put for bold tag. It's a function, so we are passing chunks as a parameter and tag b as a strong HTML tag. Let's take a look what we have. So I have 0 dogs, it's a bold, and now let's try to change. So when we update it to 1, I have 1 dog. 0 dot. So this field is calculated, and also this one is with HTML. It means if we have bold, we can change this tag for everything what we want. For example, let's create a new component, link. It's super easy one. It's a usual link which take href and return text. So and now it means that we can use this as a parameter of our translation. Now we are passing our specific React component to translation field. Okay, we missed. We have link. We need href, for example. To the some site and the text chunks. Now we can delete even this one. And as you see, it's a link, it goes to site.com, and when we change number, field is changed as well. So it's a really great and flexible approach for your customizing your internationalization. Okay, we finished with form, and one more feature I want to show you, it's with dynamic context with getting data from backend. So how we can do it? Let's create a new component. It will be dynamic data. What it should do when we are changing language, for example, we need to do a request to backend and get data on a specific language. To do it, we need import use effect and use context. We need to know language we have right now. Okay, so context. So we will return some data. To get this data, let's use state. Okay, and when we are changing context, local, we need get data. So we'll use effect So dependency will be state local, and when this one is changed, let's fetch data from some site, for example, and we need put localization. For then we will set some OK data, and with localization. So as we do not have a backend right now, there will be always error, and we will set some mocked data. So for catch, so how it works? We have dependency on local. When we are changing this variable in the context, we will execute fetch function, and we will get some data from backend. It might be article, images, any dynamic data, what is saved on the backend, and then we will put this data on our application. Okay, let's go to index and import. And we put this dynamic data. Okay, we have some error. Yes, because of its array. Okay, let's go to inspect, and we see that we had data from backend is error. And we'll go to network. When we change language, we see that we have a request to site API with language French. When we change to German, we have with German language and English. So every time when we change language, we are doing a request to our backend, and we will get specific data from backend which we can use on our application. As we don't have backend, we just mocked this data, but approach is useful and it works. And the latest feature what I want to show you, when we save some language, choose some language, and when we refresh the page, we want to see already previously used language. So how to do it? We can save language into the local storage. It's the easiest one. So let's create in our source files, let's create folder utils, local storage.js. In local storage, we need only two simple functions. The first one is save to storage, where we put name and data we want to save. We check if we have window and we have local storage. If not, we return. Otherwise, we save set item this data and we stringify this data. The second one function, we need to get data from the storage. The same, we check window and local storage, then we get data, we try to parse this data, and if everything is okay, we return this data, otherwise we return null. Now let's go to our application footer, for example. When we set language, let's use this function. Okay, this punch, and after that we need to save, for example, we saving this language, and then let's go to our context, default context. When we are setting default context, we need to check if we have data in local storage. If we have, just put it instead of default language. Let's go get from storage function. Okay, we will set, let's check the key. So we save local. As a best practices, I would recommend you to put this key to a separate constant somewhere in the project. How it's done you can find in my GitHub repository. Okay, and for default context, we have get from storage and this local variable. Okay, let's check. Let's go to application, local storage, change to French, for example, and we see that we have French language or German. Then let's refresh page, and as you see, we have interface is translated to this language. Data from backend is get the same for German language, and everything works great. Switch to English back, and it works. It was pretty easy implementation. From code implementation, that's it. And I want to discuss pros and cons of this approach. What we have. The biggest benefit of this approach is that you can change language of your application without refreshing the page, and everything works super fast. It's a good in case you have a small site with not a lot of text, and you don't worry about performance. But the biggest problem of this approach is the next one. Let's go to messages, and we have right now 3 messages. In case you will have 5 or 6 or even more, you will increase size of these translations. So now for English, for example, we have only a few fields. It's a JS or JSON file, it doesn't matter. In case you will have more text, we will add more text, and this file will be bigger. And as big is your site, then we will have more text. Size of this file will be increased. And then we can multiply it on the number of languages. And for example, you will load a huge JSON file with all languages. And very often, I guess in 90%, users do not need this data, and we do not need to load all this data. To fix it, a better solution is downloading only a specific language which user choose. For example, is it English? We downloading only English JSON file. All other files we ignore. How to do it? To implement this, we need the backend functionality. When we send request, we check what the language is, and in the build of our application, we put only a specific language. When we change language, we need refresh the page. It's a required part in this case, but in general it's okay. Then you will download another file with another translations, and that's it. This approach we are using on all big websites I'm working on, so it works great. So that's it, how to implement React Internationalization with React-Intl library. So subscribe to my YouTube channel, and soon you will get a bit more useful tutorials how to use React.